Okay, hello and good afternoon, and a warm welcome to all of you to the 177th CPR CSH Urban Workshop. Today with us we have Dr. Victoria J. Marshall as a speaker, who is a senior lecturer at National University of Singapore, where she is also uh, director of the Master of Landscape Architecture program in the Department of Architecture. Apart from Singapore, Dr. Marshall has also taught in various esteemed universities of the USA and Canada, like the New School, Columbia University, Cornell University, Harvard University, University of Pennsylvania, Pratt Institute, and University of Toronto. She has also been affiliated with the ETH Singapore, Future Cities Laboratory, Urban Rural Systems, and Agropolitan Territories of Monsoon Asia Labs. Her research focuses on the urban-rural hybridities in Asia. While she holds a PhD in geography from NUS, she also engages with how critical environmental research approaches can productively overlap with urban architecture and landscape design representation and practices. She has recently authored the book entitled Periurban Cartographies, Kolkata's Urban Ecologies and Settled Ruralities, which was published in 2024, and is also co-author of another book titled Patch Atlas, Integrating Design Practices and Ecological Knowledge for Cities as Complex Systems, which was published in 2019 by Yale University Press. So, drawing from her book Periurban Cartographies, in today's talk, Dr. Victoria will probe and engage with what are the relations, power, and connections that forged peri-urban landscapes, focusing primarily on the city of Kolkata. And so, Victoria, you have 40 to 45 minutes to speak, which will be followed by Q&A from our attendees. And to all the participants, you can put your questions in chat box, and you can also ask questions. Raise your hands and ask your questions directly to Victoria. So without any further ado, over to you, Victoria. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So thank you to the Center for Policy Research for inviting me to present my topic at this urban workshop number 177. In this talk, I'll give an overview of my book, Periurban Cartographies, through the lens of cartography. And I will then share in detail one chapter, which is about water. So in India, scholars have not only looked at how maps are drawn, but also how everyday people are drawn into maps and the mapping process. Such engagement with the Mapping Act points towards my approach for research in cartography. I extend cartography through an urban political ecology of a 1 kilometer square area of periurban Kolkata in Gangetic West Bengal, India. The study area sample was selected precisely because of the absence of spectacular or unusually rapid change. There are no mega projects here, no stories of sudden eviction. In the absence of that type of change, there is nevertheless the emergence of a particular kind of urban condition, remarkable in its characteristic of slow urban-rural hybridization. I ask, how might such lived ecologies be drawn into a cartographic practice in a meaningful way? To begin, I first must share my approach to the term periurban. There have been three distinct ways of defining it in time, from edges to extension, including extended regions, and beyond the city, meaning accounts that reject the term periurban altogether by pointing out that urbanization does not necessarily occur in proximity to cities. In all cases, as the architect Stephen Cairns has noted, the rural is portrayed as a mere backdrop for the more spectacular processes of urbanization. In response, my approach is to first retain the periurban as a useful concept. I argue that its validity must be judged in terms of the context of its use and the function it is expected to perform. Then relatedly, second, to account for the fact that processes of urban-rural hybridization exhibit distinct dynamics in different settings. I discuss this as a situated urban political ecology approach to periurbanization. Following geographer Mary Lawhorn, this includes a thick description of everyday life, attention to diffuse power and incremental change, and a commitment to practical research outcomes. Third, my response is to bring a focus on the legacies of the settled rural, including a focus on hybrid urban-rural mixing and non-human agency. I use the term non-human agency in a broad way, encompassing institutions with their official documents and reports, infrastructural and architectural legacies, as well as the forceful agencies of heat, humidity, wind, water, vegetative decay and growth, and the life of animals. In my study, I look at hybrid urban-rural mixing at the edge of metropolitan Kolkata. I argue that my study area is ordinary. It is a sample from a larger condition of landscape change. So this is the Kolkata metropolitan area with the Hooghly River shown in black. My not spectacular 1 kilometer square study area, it can be seen here. It is located within Maheshtala municipality, which is one of the many new municipalities that have been formed since the 1990s. These new municipalities can be seen in brown, and in relation to the older municipalities seen in light pink. The rural areas are shown in light brown. Learning from geographer Jennifer Robinson, I also explore the term ordinary within ordinary cities approaches, and I position my research as a contribution to comparativism. In my study, I analyze how ordinary periurban Kolkata has been rendered in secondary data, and I re-render it from the landed household using field-based data along with visualizations, including maps, illustrative photographs, and transects, which show information by way of symbols, boundaries, and invented shading. In my rendering of Kolkata, I start with two plans. The 2011 perspective plan, which are the two on the left, and the 2025 vision plan, which are the two maps on the right. And in each of these maps, my study area is shown with the little yellow symbol. The 2011 plan was created in 1990 to contain the problematic megacity through a strategy of decentralization. For the urban was considered full and the rural was seen as available to receive the overspill future urban. In the 2011 plan, the dots represent existing settlements and they're sorted into a hierarchy of classes. Urban and rural are separated into different maps. In the 2025 vision plan, created in 2005 on the right, there was a shift in the construction of territory. Rather than seeing the megacity as a negative problem to be managed and decentered, it was viewed positively as an engine for growth. In this plan, the dots show proposed new centers in the region, and they're also sorted into a hierarchy of classes. Confusingly, although the dots appear to be the main subject of the map, the investment that the plan facilitates is for road construction, as can be seen in the PowerPoint slides shown here from a mobility plan created at the same time. Investment in road infrastructure is an expression of the state government's agenda to market West Bengal as an investment destination that is surging ahead. Again, the maps are confusing. There is no synthetic map that brings all the centers or roads together in one visualization. The reader is thus left with the task of mentally collapsing all the maps together in a vision of their own making. One is left dazzled by dots. Given the graphic incomprehensibility, weak design and drafting, and informational ambition, maps with too much information, the reader is given the impression that none of the spatial elements are serious propositions, and every spatial element is negotiable. The obscuring effect is intensified rather than alleviated by their unavailable I found these hard to find. It is very likely that their obscuring cartographic conventions are a symbol of the informalized entity that is planning in Kolkata. The practice of mapmaking articulates how the urban agencies of the government of West Bengal, like other state entities in India, are clear on their aspiration for urban India, but unclear about their role in carving out the route to that future. The state agencies that map these urban futures are increasingly in the hands of public-private partnerships and the political elite, as shown in the 2030 state plan created in 2019. The 2030 plan is a geographical information system platform that measures key performance indicators where standards and pathways of development are realized in and through colorful classification, ranking, and competition. I'm still learning what these indicators are doing on the ground in place, for they are a new idiom and highly flexible. Overall, in these three visualizations I've just shared, the ordinary periurban is missing. It is simply white space, blank space. To address this, I re-render it from the household. So this diagram shows my re-rendering cartographic practice to date. Learning from geographer Gillian Rose, I show my research journey from walking to visualizing to circulations, including my sharing of the work right now. I met with people, mostly women, as they were home during the week. And the white rectangle here is my 1 kilometer square study area. The pink shows roads and buildings, and the yellow symbol shows the location of my interviews with 37 residents, supported by my amazing research assistants in Kolkata. I used my body as a sensing device, and I conducted 3 half-kilometer detailed transects. So the A is what I term the wooded settled area with buildings, tree-lined ponds, plantations, and bagans or gardens. B, I term the colony and former paddy fields. And C is the local main road. So here is the wooded settled area transect, colony and former paddy fields, and the local main road. I used remote sensing to understand land cover change over time. So here is an image from 2002 and showing changes in 2018. I also looked closely at colonial maps, including the failed master plans for the area. An important drawing was a timeline that I made of the study area through the lenses of household conversations. So each horizontal bar here is a household story. Longtime residents have lived in the area since the 1850s. You can see over here. Mud houses are shown in brown and actively cultivated fields in green. Newcomers began settling into colonies in former paddy fields since the 1990s. Concrete houses are shown in red and fallow fields in light green. My cartographic re-rendering animates these incrementally and spatially diffuse characteristics. My written urban political ecology analysis however, was difficult to narrate. So this is one of my process drawings, but it's not in the book. So geographer Sarah Pink also expressed this thought about narration, noting that some problems we face when we write linear texts with words as our only tool can be resolved by thinking of ethnographic knowledge and its representations as multilinear. And here are some more process drawings that are not in the book, but do work to show my dedication to locate often contradictory household narratives in space and time. In this case, looking at everything said by long-term residents about the lived ecology of the paddy land they own. And in this case, looking at everything said by long-term residents about the lived ecology of the plants and animals within their household land. So in my book, I completely engage this multilinear approach. I balance text, map, and photograph equally, for they form a relational set for understanding. In what follows, I'll share these as sequential, one after the other, as chapters, but they can also be thought of as multilinear, side by side, like neighbors. After all, landed households often transform alone, along one trajectory of change, while their neighbors work hard to stay in place. And some landed households become dilapidated and others move on. So in the book, I share detailed accounts of drainage and water logging, which I'll expand upon soon. Land conversion forces, the end of cultivation and the emergence of jungle. The settlement of colonies on jungly former paddy land. The cultivation and dilapidation of wooded settled areas, including ponds, plantations, and gardens or bagans. And the role of middlemen, the ward council, clubs, and committees. So to introduce my water story, I must first introduce a drainage canal and its political ecology. The 1911 Kolkata Improvement Act promoted the development of garden suburbs around Kolkata. This map from 1913 shows the planned garden suburbs in variations on the pink and green hatch. My 1 kilometer square study area is located here. In order to prepare for the improved areas in the southwest, a canal shown as a black line was built that afforded what was termed in the plan a working class suburb of single family contiguous dwellings. And the large brown shape here is Maheshtala municipality. When scaled like this, it fits into the map I showed you earlier. Maheshtala municipality, as I've noted, is one of many new urban local bodies designated since the 1990s. And the drainage canal can be seen as a black line at the north of the study area, marked with the B up here. And indeed, the water is black, as seen here and here. Although this canal was not built to benefit this area, it did function as an irrigation channel supporting paddy cultivation. However, the canal, called the Monikali, has recently undergone a series of renovations which have had a negative effect on the study area. From 2002 to 2013, the state-level Kolkata Environment Improvement Investment Program, funded by the Asian Development Bank, renovated the canal to mitigate seasonal waterlogging in upstream areas in Kolkata proper. An outcome of this is that the residents in my study area have seen an increase in the volume of water coming from upstream and a decrease in the quality of that water. That is, the canal now overflows with unhygienic black water. In 2007, the Central Level Airports Authority of India renovated a branch of the Monikali, seen here on the western side of the study area, here, which is marked with the letter A. This renovation took several years to complete. It was a project whereby the canal was dredged and the dredged fill was placed on the side of the canal. As a result, local seasonal waterlogging on the land side increased as it could not drain. So if I return to this map, you can see the bright pink squares and lines. These are the buildings and the roads. And you can see that in the areas in the middle of the study area has no buildings. These are the old paddy fields. And the blank area to the right with no buildings is the airport. So cultivation on the paddy field stopped because of the extra waterlogging from the airport canal renovation. That is, water that once drained away at the end of the season no longer drained and sat stagnant, and the crops in the fields rotted. There is only one actively cultivated plot remaining in the study area, shown with the pink symbol. The owners grow vegetables for the local market at Majerhad. The remainder of the paddy fields are no longer tended, becoming overgrown and jungly, and settled with colonies through a complex set of interactions between local middlemen and buyers from Bengal and neighboring states like Bihar and Orissa. Colonies can be seen here. They're typically developed with one road perpendicular to the main road. And they have no ponds, as seen here. The ponds are the black blobs. And I showed before, as the colonies can also be seen here in red. So as Bhattacharya notes, the project of draining wetland is a project to create property. The construction of the Monikali to create urban property can be seen within the much larger and longer project to create rural property in Bengal. This map of the Hooghly River from 1910 shows a large morass called Fresh Lake, marked with the D here, on the southern edge of my study area, which is seen here with the yellow symbol. This map of the Ganges Delta, also from 1910, shows the Fresh Lake marked as an A in relation here to other morasses or bills, marshlands, marked with a D. So you can see there's one here, there's another one here, and another one here. Also in relation to the well-known Salt Lake here, and the edge of the mangrove, which is marked here with a C and seen across the map with the little tree symbols. This map from 1936, 25 years later, shows the diminished mangrove forests in bright green pockets and various drainage works. Of note is a new canal marked with an A called the Churial Canal that drained the Fresh Lake Bill, which is now represented as simply white space on the map. The emphasis on creating and destroying property through drainage works left some things out, as anthropologist Anu Jalay has noted with regard to the syncretic mangrove environment present in my study area here today, as shown here by the pier from the Bon Bibi story. In my narrative of water, I draw attention to other things that are left out in the colonial project to create rural property, namely tidal creeks, for legacies of water-based settlements endure in my ordinary peri-urban area. So next I will show creek-based settlement landscapes found in the areas marked here in yellow, what I term wooded settled areas. This is where the tidal creek comes in. The tidal creek is seen here in this 1785 map. Elderly residents that we interviewed recalled its tidal character in 2018, noting that it would ebb and flow with the tide and sometimes calling it a canal and sometimes calling it a drain. Here is the full 1785 map. It is reported that in the 1880s, tidal creeks were quite shallow and often silted, but could be negotiated by salties or dugouts, drawing about 8 or 9 inches of water when laden. By the late 1800s, such craft were common, on the waterways, conveying rice, fruits, and vegetables to British exporting houses in Kolkata. This was a network of navigable tidal creeks and bills, part of a vast maze of waterways that in 1914 was lauded as one of the most important systems of river canals in the world. So here is the tidal creek today in my study area, seen behind a small medicinal garden. In some parts, it is lined by a new pathway. In other areas, it is just a low-lying trace. In this map, it can be seen in this string of ponds, more linear ponds. And if you look carefully, you can see that I've traced the old tidal creek in gray. Unlike the canal, which was renovated by funds from the central and state governments, the tidal creek is dilapidated because of neglect by local landowners and the local rural government, or panchayat. Nevertheless, it endures. Before the formation of Maheshtrala municipality in 1993, local residents often encroached upon the tidal creek by building small weirs or filling the creek edge to extend their land. The weirs allowed those living alongside the creek to appropriate it, first into a productive pond, and then later to sometimes fill in the pond to create the land to accommodate an extension to the house or make a place for storage. As one long-term resident explained to us, bit by bit, this creek has been encroached upon by everybody, including me, suggesting that there is an understanding of the waterway as part of a commonly held, if not commonly managed, system. As seen in the 1785 map, the creek sits amidst a wooded landscape of buildings, ponds, and gardens or bagans. Today, there are still also many tree-lined ponds used for rearing fish and harvesting wood from the plantations grown in the buns. Modest gardens for growing food, medicine, and flowers. Elaborate hobby gardens. Seasonal gardens amidst tree plantations. And jungly gardens amidst ponds and plantations. Sometimes ponds, bagans, and plantations drown. This can be due to the dilapidated creek, poorly drained colonies, or overflow from the canal. It's always hard to tell what is the reason. While this wet, wooded, settled landscape registers on early maps, as shown here in 1861 with its detailed legend. In 1852, showing its patterning around Kolkata. In 1990, as detected and classified from satellite imagery, it does not register in maps about the urban future, as noted earlier. In response, my experimental geography re-renders it in full color. In my findings, I found that while there is much conflict and disagreement, the basic, ordinary social relation of being amicable is important and has agency in my study area. However, the constant effort of and attention to creating and maintaining everyday amicability can be exhausting. I therefore consider amicability as a matter of endurance. For sociologist Abdul Malik Simone, endurance operates in the manner of fixing broken things that the residents depend upon. It points to breaks and procedural frictions. Endurance with keeping amicable relations is thus projective or onward pointing without being teleological. Overall, I found that endurance is as precious as it is precarious, for it creates important socio-spatial conditions for periurban life amidst the uncertainty of urbanization and the disrepair of the settled rural. My second reflection relates to density and contributes to other work being done on rethinking how density is measured and evaluated, as well as lived. Overall, my re-rendering of a 1 kilometre square periurban area seeks to temper the primacy of the megacity as the formative urban element in Gangetic West Bengal. After all, territory is a technique for measuring land and controlling terrain, as well as a process that is continually made and remade. Through sustained attention to the post-rural, I uncover accounts of waterlogging, tree-lined ponds, plantations, sawmills, jungle, colonies, middlemen, associations, and infestations within such areas. So rather than being thought of as not dense yet, or not dense enough to warrant attention, the study area is thought of as actively dense along other registers. My third reflection relates to practice. Maps are things, they have lives and temporalities of their own. If one takes an object-oriented attitude such as this, cartographic objects can be seen to have becomings and unbecomings. That is a capacity for work, but also a capacity for decay, to become disengaged and go dormant. While the practice of representing metropolitan Kolkata through an interface managed by the central government can be thought of as ascendant, there are unofficial cartographic projects in Kolkata and elsewhere, and they exist in a complex relationship with expert state documents. They are not counter to or resisting the state. Rather, they augment the state's maps with spaces and expressions of everyday life. The practice of mapping as evidenced in my study is positioned in relation to those experimental geographies. My hope is that many similar projects might afford better recognition of the many hybrid urban-rural territories in Gangetic West Bengal and Monsoon Asia, and inform changes that can support their endurance and transformation, and in turn, inform future urban and post-rural form. I thus offer the mapping practice created in my book as an entangled increment in itself, as a lively thing. In sum, I found that residents' power and non-humans' diverse agencies are subtle and temporary, but are nevertheless present and significant for individuals' everyday lives. That is, there are strong human relations with settled rural things that are not simply residual. At the same time, emergent relations with new lived ecologies are also agentic. In looking at an ordinary urban-rural condition as is, my research not only contributes to debates on what an urban territory is, but also what it might be. What if we imagine peri-urban territory as more than becoming urban? To imagine peri-urban territory of the future would mean valuing active density ecologies, investing in alternative peri-urban built form and economies, and supporting cultivation, cohabitation, and care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for your engaging talk. Now I would invite the participants to ask the questions or comments on the presentation. Victoria, there's one question in the chat. Shall I read? Yeah. So there's this question by Devashri Dasgupta, and he's asking, one of the very interesting projects that recently got highlighted is Tolly's Canal, one that once part of the larger Ganges tributary or tidal creek, but due as the river shifted, it got defunct. There's a recent push to rejuvenate the canal. Did your work anyway look into the recent rejuvenation effort?
I did in relation to the the money that came from the Asian Development Bank, and I met with them, and and I also read about the struggles for the desire to clear the banks, and that not being a, you know, an idea that doesn't fit. But I didn't go into it in a deep way, but I am aware of it, and I actually stayed during my field work like right next to it. I used to cross it every day in New Alipur. I'd like to learn more about it. I hope it's been successful. I do remember the metro being constructed through the middle of it. I think that's what prompted it.
Shreyashi, do you want to ask a question?
Oh, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, Shreyashi.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very interesting and it aligns to some extent with my research interest. So it was more valuable for me. So I have a question related to like institution and mechanism. Like you somewhere in the presentation you said that the like the before it was a municipality, the reappropriation or the capture of the great used to happen, that people tried to like extend their house and other things on the land where it used to be the water body. So after the change of governing body, as it became municipality, did you experience any sort of like in city regulation where it was to some extent carved? That's all. Thank you.
I didn't get the last bit. Something, another sound overrode you.
So I'm asking, after it became a municipality, was the regulation increased? So there was like the capture of the water body or the canal reduced by the locals?
I think after the municipality was formed, the problem of the waterlogged tidal creek was compounded by the problem of the renovation of the canals. So there was a lot of confusion about where the waterlogging problem comes from. And so the municipality did not invest in the water infrastructure. Most of the investment has come in the form of roads, because that's what the money is for. So paradoxically, the roads construction has also increased waterlogging, because it often does not have the sophisticated knowledge of where the water is flowing and why. So the answer is no. I sort of think that everything would be better if the money was assigned not just for roads first, but then water first and then roads. But it didn't turn out that way so far.
All right. Prakash, would you like to ask your question to Victoria?
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Hello, thank you for the wonderful lecture. As a student of social science, I just wanted to ask about how the lakes and rivers contribute to the demarcation of the urban areas or territory. That's the question. How it will help in the urbanization policies or other things like paddy field or agricultural fields, how it can be contributed. Is there any theory behind this about the river demarcation of the urban areas or landscapes? How it could be defined or demarcation? That's sufficient. Thank you.
Yeah. In India, the question is in India, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I looked into this a bit, which is that the classification of urban and rural in India is its own project. And many scholars have asked, what if the way that urban and rural were classified could be different? Because the way it's counted right now does not acknowledge the sort of the actual settlement on the ground. And then there are some scholars that use remote sensing to make arguments that is not just about urban, but also about land use change, and to create a more sort of ecological argument. The boundary making work, like that was your question, who gets to make the boundaries?
Yeah.
That's a political question. And so, yeah, my hope is different forms of cartography might inform that boundary making. But at the moment, it's still the old practice of counting people, I think. But if you want to participate in that new change, I encourage you. I think it's super important for the planet.
There's a question from Mukta. Mukta, would you want to ask
Thank
or
you.
should
Yeah, thanks, Rama. And thank you, Victoria. I was the original sort of person who reached out to you on Partho's behest. So it's really great to hear you actually talk about the book, which we've been following for a while in its making. But so my questions, I now work for the National Institute of Urban Affairs. And sorry, Rama, can I just come back because I think my colleague is also on a call.
All right.
So if there's someone
Okay.
back up.
So,
Yeah, sorry.
okay. Oh, okay. There's a question from Mahalya Chatterjee. Mahalya, would you want to ask question or should I read out? Okay.
Read out
Mahalya,
and I will join.
yes.
Mahalia.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Ajay, I remember the day I went with you in that particular area.
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah. And I am a late entrant to this lecture today because I was in a field trip with my students. I just wanted to ask you, did you talk about the uncontrolled industries of dyeing jeans, etc., which are destroying these water bodies and others? Did you bring in that issue?
I did not, because they're not a big impact on the actual water that went through my study area.
Okay.
But we did visit them together, and I do know they exist, but they're on the Turiel Canal, on the one that I showed on that map.
Yes.
The long canal that goes east-west.
Yes.
That canal needs its own attention. That's a different puzzle and a very important one too. So yeah, I guess there's Tolly's Canal, which has got its own project, Turiel, and then the fine-grained tidal creeks, which I looked at.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're all so much to be looked at.
But they're connected, no? They're connected. All these water bodies have connection once upon a time.
True.
So derogation of one will lead to the derogation of other.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I remember we were looking at the puzzle of.
We were looking at the puzzle of the paddy fields and others.
It's not so much about the housing colony, but also about the industries that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I did not, because it was not in my study area.
Okay.
But it is an issue in the municipality completely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But separately, I'll be in Kolkata in 10 days. So I hope to see you.
Oh, sure.
I'm coming for
Sure,
2
please.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us meet once again and discuss.
Okay, very good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Rama, I'm here, so I can ask now. I've
Yes,
come to a
please.
separate room. Yeah. So, Victoria, this is Mukta again, and the person who asked the question before, Dr. Mahalaya was talking about, and you were responding to his query from the urban rural definitional perspective. But at the end of your talk, when you were concluding, you were also speaking about how these kind of areas sort of need their own thinking in terms of ecologies and built forms. So the government in India is actually thinking a lot about this sort of peri-urban space now, because it's becoming increasingly clear that that's where a lot of intervention is needed. But from a policy lens, do you know of other places that have done some evolved thinking on this, and where cartography has really influenced policymakers? I mean, what I'm trying to think of is policy making is dependent on numbers, on sort of very econometric kind of sometimes numbers. It's very statistical, and in India, it's impossible to lay out just in statistical terms what is urban, what is rural, because you know how these landscapes are. So is cartography, if cartography can be a tool, have you seen that happen elsewhere, that we can use as an inspiration or a case study to change the way things are done in terms of how policy is informed?
Yeah, as it was mentioned in my introduction, I'm part of the Future Cities Lab, and they created a interface called Rscape, which is a mapping of all of Monsoon Asia. I'm just grabbing the link to share with you. Chat. And so that's one resource where they've done the difficult work of assembling data from across Monsoon Asia, and it's all together on one platform. So you can look across and compare with different countries and start to see, what issues are being faced in one area, what other areas in Monsoon Asia are also encountering the same, have the same patterning or the same struggle of things going on, and this can be some opportunities for learning in that way. So that work is super great. But in my experience, I have not. My training is landscape architecture, urban design, and geography. So I work more on design. So I work through, I guess, case studies rather than the data. But the Rscape is the data side. But for me, I just use design work to explore what's possible. And so next year, I'll be bringing 8 students to Kolkata to sort of explore what's possible, at least for this area. And I'd be happy to share that with you. If you're thinking through this, maybe we can find some policy, through thinking about futures on the ground. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Victoria. Actually, it's really interesting you say that, because in the Indian context, I'm also trained as an architect. So I always sit between these conversations where, there's a conversation which is very policy oriented, and the solutions, or even the nuances of the problems, are actually being explored by practitioners who are on the ground and, figuring out these things as they try to intervene. But these two worlds also don't meet very naturally. So part of the work, another kind of boundary work, is this, trying to break down this boundary between data informed policy and practice informed sort of knowledges. So thank you so much. I'll stay in touch with you for this
Okay,
going ahead.
good.
Yeah.
I also, in my book, I also had to do literature review on the topic of peri-urban. So I looked at all the scholarship that's being written and I wrote it up. So it's one of the chapters in my book for all the different ways that different scholars over time have thought about and theorized peri-urban. And I think that also might be helpful as well, in that there's many different definitions. So as a policy, in entering a policy conversation, I think can often change things by asking people to change the way they frame it, the way they think of it. Is something that is work that I have done.
Thank you.
Yeah, chapter 8.
Thank you. I will look it up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to
Thanks,
hearing
Rama.
more.
Hi, Victoria.
Haha, dip.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So the whole thing is so beautifully presented. I mean, I'm amazed to see the whole chapterization and mapping. I have just one question. I mean, I'm just thinking about the thing as I'm doing work on geomorphology. So one place you say that the creek, the old creeks, which is in present is located as the linear ponds. So is it I mean, can we say a cutoff, meander cutoff, or the paleo channel cutoff? Can we demarcate it in map like that way? As geomorphologically, it has a particular terms. If we consider the landscape changes in the periurban region, the ecological condition, if we consider the things, so they have particular terms.
Yeah.
So yeah. So can we use the term the meander cutoff or the meander paleo channels cutoff in instead of the linear ponds or the old creeks? Uh, what is your idea on this thing?
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I guess I should acknowledge Dip and Wita, who is my research assistant on this project. I think the paleo channel is a geomorphological characteristic of the delta, right?
Mhm.
But it has you know, I've looked at a lot of the the physical geography papers on this. I think what you're asking is at this small scale, does it count as a paleo channel? I guess it counts as a human-made paleo channel.
Yes,
Because if
yes.
someone takes an old creek and builds a weir, 2 weirs, and turns it into a fish pond, is it a paleo cutoff? Because a paleo cutoff is formed by the shifting dynamics of delta river systems, right?
Yeah.
It's
That is why.
yeah, it's like water. Yeah, there's a technical, all this dip because you study it, but yeah, so the cutoff is created by shifting channels of water, but in this case, the paleo cutoff is created by people's actions. It's a really good idea.
Yes, to demarcate the a small landscape.
Yeah, it's like an Anthropocene artifact.
Mhm.
Yeah, nice, very nice. Nice thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Usha, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. It's not really a question, but I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed your presentation. It was also, it speaks to me greatly because I've been working in the Bangalore. I'm an anthropologist, cultural anthropologist and filmmaker, and I work in the Bangalore area. And so this whole idea, the notion of what is urban, what is peri-urban, and what is rural is in terms of just what's happening to our city is quite an interesting question. And I would love to carry forward this conversation because currently I'm working on an old area in Bangalore that used to be that used to have small paddy fields, and now it is completely built over. And it's the area of Alsur and Jogpalia, which have old aquifers. So I'm looking forward to reading your book, and I'm sure much of it will resonate with me, and I'd love to keep a contact with you alive. So in case I just need to converse with you.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thanks, Rama.
Rakesh Tiwari, do you have any question? All right. Ruchika, would you like to ask your question or should I read it out?
Hi.
Hi.
I think you've responded to my question a little bit. I just wanted to ask, can you talk a little bit about why you decided to stick with the term peri-urban despite like criticisms of it from like beyond the city paradigm? And you also mentioned towards the end that peri-urban has the potential, the term for being interpreted expansively. I would love to know your views on the same. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean it's not trendy. It's more fashionable to get rid of it. And just say everything is urban but what I found was that it's a term that's used in Kolkata, so it's active, it's an active term. In some of the maps I found of my study area, it has its own category called peri-urban. So it's not unfamiliar. And so I thought it had a power in that sense, that it's not like I was bringing in a foreign category into Kolkata, but I was actively critiquing an existing category and trying to change the way it's thought. And then and I write about this in my chapter on why I kept the term peri-urban. And yeah, so I think that's the main thing, that it is a local term, and I felt that that was powerful and a powerful enough reason to use it. But I do acknowledge all the other critiques of the term, because it does tend to evoke the idea of the urban edge, like peri-urban, the edge of the urban. But when I looked at the scholarship, it had already been thought of beyond that. So I felt comfortable in using it because it's already started to get opened up. And sometimes we just need some words. Otherwise, what are we talking about? So I decided to embrace its sort of unfashionableness and try to reinvent it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up, when you say that you found the term active in maps, were these state maps?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. They're in the book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rakesh, do you want to go next?
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Rakesh. I am a geographer, and I am doing research in Patna on peri-urban issues, and many of the issues related to Calcutta is also part of. In fact, also reflects in Patna also. So this study was very much helpful. I'm doing a social impact assessment of land acquisition in peri-urban areas of Bihar, and many times I also see kind of resistance as well as acceptance. Acceptance in term that rural people at the peri-urban zone are very eager to join the urban landscape or the urban structure, and there is also long-term stigma attached of their to their rurality. So they want to join the urban without clear pathways that what they will do there. So they are many times they are ready to give up their land for in lieu of compensations, but there are no pathways ahead to how they will in fact shift to the new economies and new livelihoods. And second aspect, the rural, immediate rural community leadership or the elected leadership are not very keen to join the urban governance structure because of the political economy of mismatch of rural and urban uh, uh, the revenues as well as the government programs benefits.
Yeah.
So there are multiple things are going on the periphery area, and one of the old person who was once I just knocked to his door for for getting his permission for the land acquisition. He welcomed me and said, "At last, I, my wait is over." So he remained invested in time for 30, 40 years, and he was waiting that one day my land will be taken care, it will be purchased by the government, uh, on, and then he will bargain for it. So it's a kind, many I see the Periurban as a kind of a very fluid space-time place, and is a active space-time is a perpetually fluid place where many things are happening. Whatever we are capturing today uh, is experience of now, and maybe people and this uh, ethic approach also kind of melts here, space and time melts here in this zone, so very fluid zone. So whatever we can capture on this is will be very partial to in fact fully encapsulate it in words. So thank you for in fact re-emphasizing words as a kind of a very limited approach to in fact describe this entire experience. Thank you once again for your
Yeah.
words.
Thank you. Yeah, somewhere in I wrote that the periurban can last a lifetime. Like
Yes.
this, you can live in this reality of someone in your family farming, but no longer, someone else working in the city, someone else working, but still cultivating.
Yes.
Like that's, and yeah, one neighbor doing this, another neighbor doing that.
It's
So
a very
this
long
is the reality. Like
yes.
this is sort of how do you acknowledge that as a huge reality for many people? So,
Thank
yeah, I agree with you.
Thank
Vishal, there's a question from Vishal there. Okay, Vishal is a PhD scholar in Delhi and studying peri-urban water ecology and ecotoxicity. And he wants to ask, what are the major political actors which are shaping the landscape in your case of study? And the second question uh, is, what is the perception of the locals towards these changes? Like, are they part of the change or opposing, and how they are opposing?
With regard to water ecology.
Yes.
Well, we found many people upset with the increase of water coming from upstream and the decrease in the quality of that water. So people, you know, they live with water logging as long as it's their water, that water they know. But now I think the water is really unhealthy, and it's perceived as water from somewhere else. And that water from somewhere else is considered unfair that it's coming to their place. So that's a fight. And I think that in our conversations with residents, they were actively responding to that water from elsewhere. So that's an upstream, downstream story. Even in a very flat landscape, there is an upstream. And so they can't, and so the second part, so it's the thing I wanted to, was really interested, the thing that I found and what I was interested in elevating is the ordinary quality. So it's possible to narrate urban change in terms of big conflict. But I found that often Kolkata was framed within that way. And I wanted to, in my observation and experience of the city, I thought that it was not the only story. And so to answer your second question, what we found in telling the water story was that, you know, sometimes the renovation of the canal, you know, was a big problem, but it was only a big problem for a couple of years. And most of the farmers sold their land because the land did not drain. But then the canal got renovated and everything worked better afterwards. So then the canal became a good thing. And the water drained properly and things started to function for a while. So it's a dynamic. So sometimes the perception is really bad, but then other times it was actually considered good. So the perception of the water changes over time, depending on what sort of property you own and where you are in your life, I think. So I argue that there's lots and lots of micro conflicts rather than one big one. And even within 1 square kilometer, different people have different ideas of what is a water problem. And this is the sort of what the previous question pulled out is how do we manage this ordinary situation where there's lots and lots of small struggles, rather than one big narrative that everyone comes together to oppose. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. It's in place, and it's not one big thing.
Do we have any more questions? I don't see any hands up or questions in the chat. So maybe I thank Victoria for giving us this wonderful talk. And I thank my colleagues Mukta and Partho for coordinating this talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Partho.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rama. Now, I was just checking in with, good to see you, Victoria. Before Rama closes, I was just wondering whether you want to sort of, your last thing that you spoke about, and whether you want to expand on it a little bit, which is, so this multiplicity of micro conflicts, is that something that you see as naturally emerging? Or is this something that is strategically crafted in order to diffuse political resistance, so to speak? Because, as you said, because there's so many micro conflicts and people can't agree on what exactly the story is, there isn't a common front that is created. So is that something that is just the nature of the beast, or is it something that has actually been crafted by the political actors, so to speak? That's and so in that context, your engagement with the municipality and both the municipal corporation, just the Maestala municipality, and the relationship with the municipal corporation and the other big actors who are doing the infrastructure, the Metropolitan Development Authority, etc. How does that sort of play out? That's one. And the second is, this at the end of your talk, you spoke a bit about in some sense, the permanence of the periurban, so to speak. That the periurban is not necessarily a transitory state. It can also be a state of being of some sort. And to what extent, I'm just wondering, these are all the area that you studied, unlike the area around the Salt Lake, is not sort of protected under the Ramsar Convention, right? So it is not as if that they are that they persist because there are regulatory problems in transforming them. So do you just think it is just a matter of time, or do you think that there are actually forces at work that sort of encourage this persistence and sort of and so if you want to speculate a little bit on how you see this persistence going forward, is this something that will vanish if you come back to it 20 years from now, or will you find it in some other form anyway going forward? Sort of that's the sort of so I mean, just asking you to speculate in both the questions in some sense, because you spent such a long time and spoken to such a large number of people. So what is it that you sort of come away with in some sense?
On the first question, I would say, when I looked at the urban policies in India since the 1990s, there was a moment where investment in infrastructure tended to appear in big flashy projects. And so that is the big conflict. I mean, that raised some big conflict. And so, and Kolkata has its own sort of examples of that. And so the big conflict was the Rajarhat and flyovers and other things like that. And then there's a big flyover that goes along Budge Trunk Road, which was clearly one big conflict. And so I feel like those ones went ahead knowing that there would be conflict. And so it was produced with the idea that no matter what people say, it will happen. And then but because the sort of planning for Kolkata doesn't happen, it happens in fragments in the city. So that's where the map that I drew about which municipality to select, like which one was more ordinary than the others, like where are the most ordinary ones, and then out of the most ordinary ones, which one would I pick? So in doing so, I started to look at the ones that have these big flashy projects that are causing lots of and so I felt that actually there's, compared to, Partha, we've known each other for a while, but, compared to China, because we were doing comparative work at that point, the growth of Indian cities occurs in certain directions and certain pieces. But I observed that the ordinary periurban was actually the dominant, even though the big flashy projects got all the media, the actual small micro changes was actually bigger. And I don't know, to answer your question, whether it's produced, I think it's just out of vision. Like it's the focus is in the trying to be global, and everything else is out of range. And so as a designer, or as a sort of creative person, or as someone who cares about cities, I sort of think that's an opportunity. Like if no one's looking at it, like maybe there's a space there to empower it, because it's out of focus. And then the municipality was not being looked after, was not being invested in. You know, they also felt out of the loop. And so that's why they embraced that public-private flyover, and sort of were trying to find their own way to grow. And then your question of the permanence of the periurban is something I struggled with a lot. And so on one hand, one way to think of it is, yes, places will change, but is there a way that through understanding them deeper, they can change better? So that's where a lot of the discussion on the water and the roads comes in. Like, if the investment was not, because when the money comes, it comes with a mandate to be about sewage, to be about road, to be about whatever, education. But if it came with the logic of the local lived ecology, I think it would be better. It will be easier to be periurban if it came within the logic of allowing people to persist amidst all the changes. And then, because my project is not an argument for conservation. I don't think that is a real scenario. But one thought that I was thinking to explore, which is something that was part of my research group, is that, and something I'm thinking to explore when I come to Kolkata, that I am going to explore when I come to Kolkata in 10 days, is I want to ride the train and see where the vegetables come from. Because in the city, I understand that a lot of the food comes in on the commuter train. And so I do feel that those places are important for the city. And I wonder if they need some attention, or if design can help elevate them, or our maps can help re-represent that. And if there is, it's not conservation, but it's part of the sustainable city story, I think. So I'm saying not all periurban should be, preserved because agriculture is important, but maybe in cities there are agricultural areas that need to be invested in, because the city relies on them. So that's what I'm thinking to study next year with my students, and then I can share that work later on.
That would be fascinating. I think especially the one down south, as you go towards the Sundarbans, you'll find Durba Chattaraj and Nilanjan Sarkar, both of their Nilanjan from a political standpoint, Durba in a much more anthropological sort of lens describe that part of the extended city quite nicely. So it'll be I'll send you those references if you want to follow up before you get there. But
Okay,
yes,
great.
I mean, yes, it'll be it's Kolkata still, I think, moves at a pace that can be studied. So it's really nice to sort of see that structure going forward. Sure. Sorry, Rama. Back to you.
Yes. Thank you, Partha. Okay, let me thank again to Victoria. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us and having given us this wonderful talk. And I would also like to thank Partha and Mukta for coordinating this talk. With this, and thanks to everyone who is here. With this, good evening to all and bye bye.